Welcome to Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, a podcast brought to you by DMV Wrestling News at dmwrestlingnews.com. I'm your host, Jeff Quinton, and I'll be interviewing guests from the world of professional wrestling from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, brought to you by DMV Wrestling News. I'm your host, Jeff Quinton, and today we've got something special for you as we dive into the highly anticipated NWA 76 event, coming to you live from the legendary 2300 Arena in Philadelphia on Saturday, August 31st. In this episode, I sit down with two rising stars in the wrestling world, Big Daddy Adrianna Mosley and Ranch Hand Shawn Carlson. We'll chat about their journeys in the squared circle, what it means to wrestle in one of the most iconic venues in pro wrestling history, and their thoughts on the big night ahead. Don't forget to check out dmwrestlingnews.com daily for all the latest on the NWA and everything else happening in the Mid-Atlantic wrestling scene. Get ready because this is going to be an insightful look into the world of pro wrestling. Hi, this is Jeff Quinton. I'm your host, and today we're previewing NWA 76 in Philadelphia on August 31st, and my guest is Adrianna Mosley, who's going to be wrestling in the Burke Invitational Gauntlet at that show. First of all, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start out with some questions about your pro wrestling career. First of all, when did you get into pro wrestling as a fan?
So I kind of started off late in life. I became a fan in early 2016.
And what wrestlers have you been a fan of?
When I first started watching WWE, I think like the first wrestler that kind of really caught my eye was Shinsuke Nakamura. I just always been in love with his wrestling style, well, really the Japanese wrestling style, and just his overall character.
Yeah, he was really impressive when he came in to me too, and I really liked his entrance music, especially when they did it the one time with the violins.
Oh yeah, that was great. I always kept that song on repeat.
So how did you get involved in wrestling as a wrestler?
So my friend brought me to an independent show and I just fell in love with it. And there just like came to a point where I was like, I got to be a part of this. And I became friends with Mr. Grimm. He kind of helped me and I started off by being his manager. And then eventually I started training and became a wrestler.
And you have multiple championships now, if I recall correctly, right?
Yes.
Could you go into which championships you have?
Sure. I'm a four-time 1CW Women's Champion in Houston, Delaware, and I am the current reigning one-time champion for Pay Your Dues Wrestling in Halethorpe, Maryland.
And what other companies are you working for currently?
Currently, I'm working at BCW, IAW in Virginia. I can't even remember all of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I knew I've seen you at 1CW and at Pay Your Dues.
Yeah.
Who are some current wrestlers you admire, whether you've worked with them or not?
Sammy Chaos is a big one. I knew Sammy Chaos before she was a wrestler, and just seeing how much she's grown is really impressive. How she's getting her name out there, and she's a beast and an amazing person. Another one is Layla James. She's an up and coming wrestler out of Rochester, New York. Very beautiful person, inside and out. Also, Journey Burke. Journey Burke and I have wrestled in the ring so many times, and just being able to, grow with somebody is great, as well as Zoe Cannon. She's a really good friend of mine. Just love being able to share the locker room with her and being able to just, kick back, relax, and have an amazing match with her. It was great at Three Legacies.
Seen all of those wrestle either in person or on streaming, and I really agree with you about Journey Burke and Zoe Cannon. Their career has really been going well for them. Zoe was just skyrocketing from when her training started to where she is now.
Yeah, that is true. She's just she's really grown, and I was really proud of her for especially when I saw her going to MLW and then going on to working at Battleground Pro Wrestling, Championship Wrestling at the 2300 Arena with Stevie Brooks. That's another one. Just seeing girls become successful in the ring and really making a name for themselves it just makes me so proud.
What is your most memorable match of your career so far? Or maybe talk about more than one memorable match.
Probably one of them is Natalia Markova from NWA. Just being able to share the ring with somebody that is so amazing and is basically like a living legend. Coming from a good company. At first, I was like a little intimidated, um, but just the respect that I have for her, of her going toe to toe with me and us having a great match. That was probably one of my most favorites. Another one would probably be with Stevie Brooks, being able to share the ring. Well, both her and Sammy Chaos's were at bell to bell as well. Being able to share the ring with them both as an opponent, it just shows like us bigger girls, we can do stuff. And just being able to tear a good match up, it was definitely memorable. Because usually I'm so used to working girls that are smaller than me, but actually having somebody that can throw you around is actually it's pretty refreshing. So yeah, those are one of my most favorite matches that I've had.
What's the hardest bump you've ever taken?
Probably, probably a butt bump, surprisingly. Uh, that or a flip bump. I did a flip bump off of the top rope, and that was pretty hard.
And getting back to your Natalia Markova match for a second, was that the one in Woodbury?
Yes.
I got a good picture of her hitting the ceiling when she went off the top rope there.
Oh yeah, that threw me so off guard. I was like, oh my goodness. I knew like it had a low ceiling, but I didn't know it was that low.
At NWA 76, you're wrestling in the Burke Invitational Gauntlet for a shot at the Women's Championship currently held by Kinsey Page. Have you wrestled against any participants in the Gauntlet before, and what do you think about the field of women overall?
The only one that I've wrestled was Natalia. The other ones are I people I have never met, except for Kinsey Page and Kylie Page. I know them both. I'm really honored to be a part of that. And whenever the internet is such a big place, and you quote unquote meet these people, these people, but actually getting to meet such great people and such admirable people is definitely a pleasure. Something that I'm really looking forward to. Not even just working for NWA, but being able to share the locker room with such amazing women is just great.
What does it mean for you to wrestle for a chance to compete for a title that's been held historically by Mildred Burke, June Byers, the Fabulous Moolah, Leilani Kai, and more recently by Jazz, Allison Kay, Thunder Rosa, Serena Deeb, Camille, and the current champion Kinsey Page?
It really means the world to me. If you would have told me this a year ago, that I'd be getting a shot at this in a gauntlet in a 2300 arena at that, for NWA Women's Champion, I'd probably smack you in the face. It is such an honor. And still to this day, I'm kind of like pinching myself because I'm like, what have I done to deserve this? It's just, sometimes I have to remember like all that hard work paid off. Try to get my name out there, training my behind off, and it's really paying off. And at NWA, I'm definitely going to put my best foot forward and work my hardest.
What does it mean for you to wrestle in 2300 Arena with the history of that building, going back to Viking Hall and 2300 and ECW Arena?
It's unbelievable. And until I'm there, I'm probably not going to believe it. And probably even then, I won't believe it. It's it's something that I've definitely had a goal for. I didn't expect to achieve it so soon, but again, I'm so honored to be able to wrestle in such a historical building, um, and to be able to make myself known there.
Now, if you could talk to me a little bit about personal things, like what hobbies you have and things like that.
Outside of wrestling, a couple of hobbies that I have, I love to travel. I'm a big foodie, so I'm really big on Hawaiian barbecue and Korean barbecue. I'm also a coffee addict. So wherever I go, I look for like good coffee places. I like to cook and bake sometimes. I'm not really a good cake decorator, but I can make stuff taste good. And then also, I'm really big into mental health. I actually do have my PhD in psychology. So I'm really big on that. And that's another thing that kind of fuels me in wrestling, and why I kind of want to make it big, because a lot of the money that I want to be making in there is going to go to those who are struggling with mental health but do not have the exact resources to get that help that they need.
And that's really important. There's been a lot of attention on it lately with things like Brandon Holman recently at MCW and CZW. I know my last podcast episode was a tribute to him before the memorial show that MCW had a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate.
I didn't know about your PhD, so when you said you had class, you were teaching a class, right?
So I also do have my license in dance class called Mixed Fit. So that's what I also do. I love dancing. So I actually got certified in doing that at my gym.
I know I'm looking at possibly checking out some food in Philly while I'm there, but I really am going to go low budget because I'm going to check out some different cheesesteak places. So.
There's like one, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's not too far from the 2300 arena. It's on that, what is it? I think it's Oregon Street. It's like a blue and white building. I can't remember what it is, but it's really good.
I'll check it out. I know I like Sonny's down on Market Street near Center City. That was the last one that I checked out with a friend of mine that lives in Philly.
Oh, well, I found like a taco place down there, so.
That's always a good thing to find too. I know the last different taco place. There's some good tacos around Baltimore where I live, but the last different one I found was when I was in Dallas last year, and I went to a Torchy's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was really good. Where do you see yourself in 5 years in your wrestling career?
I definitely see myself being signed with a major company, either that or be wrestling globally. I'm definitely hoping and pushing myself to be wrestling outside of the United States by the end of the year. I definitely do have some things in the works with that. Um, so yeah, I definitely see myself being signed in a matter of 5 years.
Okay, that's all the questions I have right now. I just want to thank you for being on the podcast again.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Hi, this is Jeff Quinton. I'm talking today to Shawn Carlson, and we're talking about pro wrestling and also about NWA 76 on August 31st in Philadelphia at 2300 Arena. And how are you doing, Shawn?
Man, I'm great. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. To start things out, I wanted to ask you about how you got interested in pro wrestling as a kid, probably, and who you admired then and who you were a fan of then.
Yeah, so I grew up in the greatest age of wrestling, I believe, and that is the Monday Night Wars. So kind of how it started was my dad was watching Monday Night Nitro. And I just fell in love with the pageantry, everything. So Sting was technically my first favorite. And it's Crow Sting, not Surfer Sting. He was my first favorite because there was so much mystique behind him. But then as people started changing the channels, so did my dad. And, WWE Raw or WWF Raw at the time. And you had Stone Cold Steve Austin. And from the moment me seeing Stone Cold, I was like, oh my God, this is what a badass is. You grow up watching superheroes and everything. I see it all the time. Kids nowadays, they relate to superheroes. Well, my superhero was Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was my guy, that was my Popeye. He drank a beer. He became tougher, So, yeah, Stone Cold was my guy. He was my dude.
And later, how did you get into pro wrestling as a wrestler?
So that is a story unbeknownst to itself. So I actually started out, I trained under two guys for one day, and I just felt like it was so, how do I want to put it? It was just really bad. Like there was no structure, there was no nothing. It was literally like, oh, we're going to make you bump 100 times and we don't care if you hit your head. Oh, you're going to run these ropes. We're going to hit you with this broomstick until you throw up 3 times. Stuff like that. And I was like, I trained with him one day and I was like, this is just like, stupid. Like I'm not going to put my life doing this. But I was still coming to indie shows and I was like, oh, one thing they don't have, because this was early in the, 2010s, was a podcast. And so I did a podcast for independent wrestling in the area. During that time, I got hooked up with a dude who was starting his own company, and kind of one thing led to another. Me and him became partners in a company. That only happened for 3 shows, and then he didn't pay the taxes. So the company was shut down, and I had just bought a wrestling ring. So I was going to, I was actually going to sell it and get out of the business 100%. And Sean Hardy came to me and said, hey, this is what I do, and I'm thinking about getting back into it, because he had taken a hiatus due to his back injury. And he's like, is this something you want to do? And it was like an instant yes. And me and him sat down and we came up with the rebirth of 1CW and how we were going to do it. And uh, I had been training with this guy, Matt Wild, who everybody knows from Riot City. He had been training me in my own ring, here and there. And I was trained to be a manager. And he was like, you could be the top manager. Then during COVID, professional wrestling really took a downturn, not only just, with live shows, but just with everything. And the Delaware School, Totem Pro Wrestling or Totem Wrestling Center or whatever you want to call it, it ended up shutting down. And so, COVID was ending. Everybody was starting to get back to the routine. I reached out to the guy who was the head trainer, Mark Harrow, and was like, hey, I feel there's a big, loss in wrestling without a training school in the area. And he said, well, I'm retired. And I said, let's meet and talk. Let me see if I can get you out of retirement. And we did. And it took 3 conversations. And after the first one, I was pretty sure we were going to get back on track. And then, after the first one, second one, third one, we finally made a deal. So he became the head trainer of Workhorse, which is my school that I owned. And I could have just been like, oh, I own a school, so now I'm a wrestler. But I literally started a day one, trained and learned everything, and now I'm the assistant trainer here. So life's been crazy, man. It's definitely something different. So it's definitely been different.
Who have you admired and wanted to work with or worked with in professional wrestling?
Yeah, so I admire so many guys. There are so many hardworking guys that really bust their ass, and girls. I don't want to take away from girls, but, so many people that really truly work hard in this business. And luckily this year, man, I'll be honest with you, I checked a lot of those off my bucket list, whether it was Brian Idol, a guy who kind of, I hate saying it like this, but kind of self-made. He never gave up on himself. He continued to grind. He got signed by the NWA, and now he's, you see it all everywhere. He's one of the CEOs, or not CEOs, but one of the people in charge. So Brian Idol was somebody I was really glad to get in the ring with. Donovan Dijak I was in the ring with earlier this year. He's another guy who just, first off, he is so tall. Like, I didn't know how tall he was until actually meeting him. He's so tall. But he's a guy who kind of made his own mark and went and did everything on his own. And, he felt like he couldn't get anywhere where he was at in WWE. So he's like, screw it, I'll go back to the Indies and try something. And O'Shea Edwards. O'Shea Edwards is another guy who's been around forever and just has a great mindset, and somebody I really look up to, because he's been there, he's done it, and he's still pushing, and he's still wanting, and he's still hungry. And I think a lot of that gets lost in professional wrestling. Sometimes we're not as hungry as we should be. We get very complacent. I see a lot of people have that. They get their break and then they're done. They did it. And O'Shea is not that guy. He wants more and more all the time. So O'Shea is definitely one. Some guys that I haven't gotten in the ring with yet that I really, really want to. There's so many, so I'm trying to be very picky and choosy, I guess you could say. If we're going like stardom and well known, I would say Matt Cardona. Matt Cardona is another one of those guys who's really, done his thing. He's the indie god or whatever he calls it, king of the indies, and he's one guy who, again, he could have probably stayed in WWE and been there for another 5-6 years, but just been beat down so bad. I'd really like to get in the ring with the Von Erichs. Both those guys have so much talent and potential. I'd really like to get in the ring with them. And I mean, there's so many more. I could go on and on for days. So I don't know how long you want me to go on just that question, because there's so many guys out there that are talented that I really want to get in the ring with.
Well, let's talk about somebody you got in the ring with before, and what one or two or maybe even 3 of your most memorable matches.
Okay, yeah. So Brian Morris and I have had an amazing feud over the last, year and a half. And Brian is one of those guys who, he has so much potential. He embodies what a heel is. He is great in the ring, out of the ring, working with him. He looks like a champion. I got an Iron Man match with him, and Brian is one of those guys who you can just, now me and Brian kind of just have that, we don't need to call so much. We know what each other's going to do kind of feel. And I truly love Brian Morris. I think he's one of the, best guys to work with. If we're breaking kayfabe, if we're in kayfabe, I hate that son of a bitch. I want to punch him in the face. But outside of the ring, he is tremendous. Just straight up tremendous.
What is the hardest bump you've ever taken?
Ooh, I'll be honest with you. I don't take many hard bumps. I'm very selective in what I'm going to do, just because I actually work with my body every single day. So you'll never see me do something where I'm like, ooh, I'm ready to take this and not work for the next week. But one of the hardest ones I took was me and Devontae wrestled a last man standing match, and when he gave me a TKO, when he bumped, the chair came up, and so it stood straight up and down, and my shoulder ate it. So that was probably the hardest bump I've taken. If I'm being honest, Donovan Dijak's forearms were the hardest thing I've ever taken because he is just a monster and will light you up, man. But other than that, something that or coming off the ladder with me and Miles Millennium, another guy who I love working with. Miles is such a tremendous talent. So one of those two bumps. But again, I try to limit myself on taking crazy stuff because I'd rather have longevity in this business than a crazy bump that some people will remember for, a year.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Whew. Well, that's a great question. And it's hard to say because this business is so ruthless, right? Starting next weekend, something could happen good for me. I could be signed by the NWA, and in 5 years, I could be, the NWA world champion, holding the 10 pounds of gold. Another thing is I could be signed to AEW. Another thing is I could just be doing the same thing. But in 5 years, my daughter will be 8 years old. So she'll be in school, and my son will be 5 years old. So he'll be going to kindergarten. And so I see myself in 5 years as being a great dad that's dedicated to my wife and children. The wrestling's great. This is cool. Wrestling's amazing, but my wife and kids are my life. So if I'm going something I can guarantee you in 5 years, I'll be a tremendous dad and a husband, and that's all I can really guarantee. Otherwise, everything else, I'm here for the ride. I'll continue to work hard. Hopefully the school will be in great standing by then, and I'll have some students that we train, be tremendous places because that's what it's all about. We have some great talents coming through the Workhorse Training Center, and that's what I want to see. But in 5 years, personally, I want to be a better father and a better husband. So that's my main goals.
And that was the best answer you could have given, honestly.
No, it's serious. I see, and look, I don't want to pick on guys or, anybody get mad at this comment, but I see so many guys who are willing to put wrestling above their family. And that's not me, man. I love this. I love my family too much. If we're going to be completely honest, when I got offered the NWA spot on August 31st, originally I wasn't going to take it. And my wife was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm about to give up a huge opportunity for you." And she was like, "What do you mean?" Her favorite singer ever is Avril Lavigne. And we had concert tickets to see her for August 31st. And I was like, you wanted to go to this concert. We got tickets. And she's like, "Dude, F them tickets. We will sell them. We're going to do this. You have worked way too hard for this." And I knew that would be her response. But that's why I almost didn't tell her, because at the end of the day, family is so much more important than wrestling. And yes, I have family within wrestling. I love these guys. We're a team, we're a group. But at the end of the day, if I quit tomorrow, none of them guys are calling me, but my wife and kids are here. And I see so many people throw that away when they shouldn't be. And that's my biggest advice to everybody that walks into our school is it's family first. Then you can either put your shoot job or wrestling second. Doesn't matter to me either way, but your family should come first. And I think some people get that really lost in wrestling.
Well, I mean, that's why we didn't get this interview scheduled until now, because I had family things come up. So, and you had family issues come up. So, I mean, that's just the way it's supposed to be. And I know I've heard in some football coaching environments or other sports coaching environments now where the assistant coaches will be penalized if they don't go to events with their family.
Yeah, and that's great. I love to see that change in the world. You know what I mean? I feel like for so long, people, risk their families and everything for this. And I feel like in the last 5 years, there's been a real big change toward that. You know what I mean? The sacrifice is great. I respect anybody who makes the sacrifices. I'm not saying like I'm a better person because of that. But what I am saying is that this is what's important to me. And if that's what's important to you, cool. Like, I respect that. But family is what's important to me. There has been times where, for example, I had an offer for a date on my daughter's birthday, and the company got really pissed with me and pulled a bunch of my dates that I had with them because I wouldn't take this because they had something special planned with me that night. But it's my daughter's legit birthday, but also her birthday weekend I've never wrestled on and I never take a booking for. But it's her legit birthday, and I was like, "There's no way." And they were like, "Oh, well, you could just celebrate the next day." And I'm like, "I could, or I'm just going to celebrate on her birthday because it's her birthday." Like, again, some people just get too wrapped up in this. At the end of the day, family first is how I put it to every single person in my school and anybody I'm around that asks for advice. That's the first thing I say.
Could you talk about what you think the state of professional wrestling is now, including indie wrestling and the big companies?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I might have a different answer than a lot of people. I think the top company is succeeding well, and I think WWE is doing great things. But I think after that, there are a ton of companies that are suffering, and I like to equivalent. I equivalent a lot of racing or a lot of wrestling to NASCAR racing and racing in general, right? And because it's something I know very well, but you could also equivalent it to baseball, if you will. And right now, we have a big surge of fans watching WWE. And everybody's like, oh, that's a trickle down effect. That'll help us. It could or it couldn't, right? Because if you're watching the top thing and you go to some of these companies that are literally terrible, why would you consistently want to go there and spend your money? If anything, that's going to run you off because there are so many bad companies. There are a lot of good companies. So I'm not trying to say I'm pointing any certain companies out, but there are so many bad companies that if you go and experience that, and that's your first time at an indie level event, you lose 50% of those customers. They're not going to come back because why would they want to come back and watch some joke? I'll never forget one of the first indie shows. I was sitting there and a guy was sitting next to me and he goes, I am never coming to one of these again. And I just simply asked why. And he said, if I want to watch my two neighbors fight, I'll just give them a 30-pack of beer. Why would I want to leave my house and come sit here and watch these two fat guys try to run into each other? And it really got me thinking on that. Indie wrestling in general, if you're not putting on a good product that can make the people care, that looks like it's professional, you're pissing in the wind. And that's where I start getting frustrated with independent wrestling companies. You need to have a product that's good, that's technically sound. The wrestlers are sound. They're trained well. They also have characters that the people can identify with. Because if they can't do that, they don't care and they start losing interest, right? So you need those two things, but you also need a good ring and a good setup to look like a professional. You need lights. You need good sounds. You need a good entranceway. You need it to look professional because you are trying to equivalent yourself of being a lower level WWE. If you have a tent that you're coming out of that's duct taped together with sheets, it doesn't look professional. And that's where I start getting frustrated with some of these companies. You can do whatever you want in independent wrestling as long as it looks professional, as long as it's done professionally. I usually don't care. But it's these companies that constantly run, bad storylines and, bad things just in general and stuff like that. I don't want to get into too much detail, but, if I know you wrote about this, so I want to say on this. So, in some states, minors can't wrestle, right? In some states, they can wrestle. And, that's great. If that minor looks like a professional wrestler, acts like a professional wrestler, and can conduct himself in a professional environment, I see no reason why that minor can't wrestle. Now, if it's against the law, clearly they can't, right? But if they can do all that, fine. The problem is there are some that can't, and then they give the ones that can a bad name. That same thing is exactly what's wrong with independent wrestling. There are good companies. There are great companies out there. But when you see an independent wrestling flyer, a lot of people can't decipher what a D or a 1 or what a M and a W are. They don't understand the differences because they're just looking at, oh, that's a wrestling show. And so if you go to any company and you have a bad experience, chances are the next time you see a flyer, you're not going to go back because you assume it's the same thing. And that's the problem with independent wrestling. We have no marketability to show what's different than the other. And if you go to a bad show, you end up destroying the area. And that's why when 1CW came back, when 1CW revamped themselves, there were 7 companies in Delaware. 7. There are 2 in Delaware right now that run full time. There are some that come in and out. But the problem is, the 2 companies that are running in Delaware have good professional athletes and try to make it a show. They try to make it a real show. So people aren't trying to pop up and do a shit show because it's hard to compete with those 2. I completely understand if they go to DCW, have a great time. They're probably going to see a good show, and then that's going to want them to come back to see wrestling. 1CW, same thing. So I don't mind sharing fans with people that are going to put on a good show. What happens is these other companies will run. They'll put on a bad show where the ring's falling apart, or they'll put on a show where there's something going on that you don't want to see, and that's what's going to make people go, I don't want to see independent wrestling anymore. So while, yes, WWE's killing it, there's a reason why AEW is not doing good, and they have top-tier names. It's because they don't put on a proper show. It doesn't look like a wrestling show. It looks like a super indie show. And if you're going to go to WWE and spend your money, or AEW to spend your money, you're going to spend your money at WWE. The problem is, once you get down to the indies, people can't decipher the difference. And that's where the problem starts to lie within independent wrestling. My personal opinion, there's a lot of companies that shouldn't be running because they're going to end up killing the market. And that's why you're starting to see, in the last 2 years, you start to see a lot of companies starting to fade out. And there's nothing wrong with that. I understand, financial hardships and everything else. But that's also great for the good companies because you're going to continue to draw good people as long as you can advertise properly. Sorry, I know that was a little long-winded, but it's something that I rant on all the time.
That was a great answer. And to follow up on that, what are some good companies that you can talk about?
So, WDWA in West Virginia is a great company. Gavin and them guys work really hard to put in a good show. They're a great company. The Wrestling Independent in Philadelphia, they're just getting their legs underneath them. They're trying really hard to be that good company, Of course, 1CW, they're my heart and soul. So I consider us a good company. There are other companies. MCW is an amazing company. I don't work for them. MCW is an amazing company. They work really hard. I don't work for Titan. They're another good company. And they're trying really hard in New Jersey to change themselves from every other New Jersey company. You know what I mean? So to go into detail with every single company would be insane. But there are companies that are really trying to make the name for themselves. Fight Club in DC is another one. They are trying to be a predominantly black company with great professional wrestling. Technical. Then there's characters. They have brawlers. They have everything. They're doing it. They're trying to do it right. And they're trying to make a name for themselves because they don't have one established. The Wrestling Independent is doing the same thing. They don't have a name for themselves yet. They're trying to establish themselves as the top name in independent wrestling. And I think that's very important to not run every month and try to come in guns blazing. It's good to run 4 times a year and set yourselves up for a longevity rather than trying to be a flash in the pan. And I see that happening with a lot of independent wrestling. Invictus is another company that looks great. And they took a hiatus because they couldn't give the time nor the effort to the company that they needed to. So they took a little hiatus. So that's another company I respect just off of that. And there's so many of them like that. But there's a lot of bad, man. And I just get so worked up that there's all this bad and people and some of these indie guys, they'll just go work wherever. And it's like, man, have some self-respect for yourself. Have quality over quantity. Work better places than trying to work yourself to death because a lot of times our body needs rest. I took off this weekend because my body needs rest. I had worked every weekend since Labor Day weekend, wrestling wise. And it's like, man, you do definitely need that time off. And it's a grind. And sometimes if you don't take that time off, that's when you're going to get injured. So, I'm really big on that. And as far as great companies, there's a lot of them, and it's finding them out and figuring out which ones are good and which ones are bad. But a lot of times you look at the talent, and the talent can show you everything. That's kind of how I'll leave it. If you look at the talent, you'll kind of see the good companies compared to the bad companies.
And now let's talk about the NWA and what you could say about them in the Lightning One era since Billy Corgan bought them, and also how they got through COVID and how they're doing now.
Yeah, so the NWA, I seen somebody post a negative post about them the other day. And, they were like, oh, well, the NWA is equivalent to, and I think they said like a single A baseball team, but really the NWA is equivalent to a rebranding top company. Yeah, they tried to go in fast. I really do believe that. Billy Corgan was trying to do, everything right off the jump. He tried to do a pay-per-view earlier this year or last year and it didn't work out. He almost had a TV deal, and I think the pay-per-view cost him some of that in the TV deal. There's things that happen, right? And that's life. But if you're consistently putting on good shows, if you're consistently trying to make this better, who is it to say that this company won't be something in 3 years? They're rebranding themselves. They're trying to make themselves different than everything else. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's a big thing. And that's why I would love to be a part of the NWA on a full-time basis because of that. And look, I get it. Everybody's going to be like, of course you would. It's a contracted company. You'd make money. But at the same time, there's a contracted company that I wouldn't go to work for because I'm afraid that that's a sinking ship. I'd rather, with what they would offer probably me, I'd rather stay and work my own job than try to do that. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused on things. And I think the NWA is trying to rise their ship up. They have a great name. They have a great owner. The owner's not, the owner's not a billionaire like Tony Khan, but the owner's also not just spending money, hand over fist, like, oh, here's all the money. He's really putting in a play and he's really, okay, let's work these venues. Let's build up to this kind of venue. Let's work a territory deal with some of these companies so we can have more people in our eyesight, and we do what the NWA originally was. And I think going back to your home roots is something big. So while yes, I understand that they're not the top company, I really do believe that there is something special here that can be done, and I'm hoping that that's what's going to end up happening. And not just because I'm going to work there, but because there's a lot of good people there and a lot of good people working hard. And Billy Corgan is working hard. He's not just going to spend money. He's going in as a businessman, and I think that's a big problem with independent wrestling. Sometimes the guys get in there and they're trying to run their own action figure league, and it's like, it's not about that. This is a business. And I think he's trying to do that. So I'm really looking forward to the future for the NWA and see where they keep going and see how they keep growing.
Yeah, I was interested in what they're doing with the territories, that they're branding as their territories, and how that fits in with the whole independent wrestling scene otherwise, because I'd made the comment before to Shawn Hardy when he was on my first episode of this podcast about how there was a lot of resemblance to the independent scene and territory days, because you could work wherever you want to, as much as you want to, unless you're trying to get a job with one of the big companies that has exclusive contracts that doesn't allow you to work independent scene wrestling companies. So I think there's a lot of similarities to that. And I think if you're not holding people in exclusive contracts, that it could work out really well, possibly for a company like NWA.
Yeah, and again, I think they're going to do what's best for their business. And if that's including having some great, companies under them working in a working partnership, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of success that can be had. I think where people get the misunderstanding is what that NWA can mean compared to what it is. And I think that's where it gets lost. The NWA has been through 3 or 4 rebirths, just since COVID, before COVID, everything else. When it came back from COVID, it was hot. Everybody was loving it. You know what I mean? I mean, it was so hot, it got Jim Cornette canceled again for the 15th time, right? Like, that's how hot it was. And, I was talking to a guy who was under contract for him, and he said that, like, they're doing it right. But the problem is there's other companies who are trying to just throw money everywhere. So they're trying to build themselves up while there's other companies who are just shotgunning everything. And I think you'll see that over the next 5 years, what the differences will be. You know what I mean? It's a different world when you're trying to create a business, whether you're trying to, really push it, and you're trying to do it the slow and right way where you build up. And I think that's the problem with independent wrestling, or not independent wrestling, but just wrestling in general. You're trying to build a company up, and sometimes it takes years and years to get to the place where you can be, compared to trying to just do it all in one night. And I think that's where people get lost at.
I know it got me back into watching wrestling. In 2019, I started watching Power on YouTube and have watched it off and on since then. COVID kind of killed it. And then I watched when they were on Fight. And then I kind of got away from it for a while, but I've been watching it again now the last few months. So, I mean, I just really like watching it. And I mean, I really like their announce team. I've met a couple of their people that have been on their announce team before at events. I mean, I met Mae Valentine. I met Velvet Sky when she was still working for them. So I'd hoped to meet Tim Storm, but I didn't get down to an event in Waldorf that he was at. But I just really like the work that they do largely. I mean, I've had some issues with some of their booking decisions, but that's every company I have trouble with booking decisions that they make sometimes. So that goes with the territory of a wrestling company or with any sport. There's things I don't like that my favorite NASCAR team does, or my favorite football team. So it's just understandable that there's going to be the same thing with wrestling. And I'm just really looking forward to going to the show next week. And so we'll talk about that now. Talk about the show next week in Philly and what you think about going into it.
Yeah, so it's at the 2300 Arena, which is like illustrious just in general. So this checks off a lot of my bucket list stuff for me. You know what I mean? I was a kid who found ECW late, not late, but it had already been what it was. It was known. So it wasn't like I was turning it on at 3:00 in the morning, but it was known, and it was on a primetime spot when I found it. But, I'm wrestling at an illustrious 2300 Arena. That's super cool. I will be wrestling for one of the oldest wrestling companies in the world with the NWA, and on their 76th anniversary at that. So that's pretty dope. I don't know if I can tell who I'm working yet. But there's so much great talent there, and there's so much great local talent going. I'm blessed that, you had her on earlier this week. I'm blessed that, Adrianna, a girl who trains at our same school, kind of, I wouldn't say trains under me, but, I'm the assistant trainer. She trains under Mark Harrow right now, and she's been working her tail off. She's got the opportunity. A referee also that came through our school, James Rudy, he's getting the opportunity to be there. And, I think I fit in perfect with what they're trying to do. I try to say I like trying to think I'm a sports-based professional wrestler who can brawl, and I think that I would fit in perfect there, and I think I'm going to give them something that they're willing to see. I know that crowd's going to be crazy with going crazy for Ranch Hand, so I appreciate that very much. The 1CW crowd's really stood up for me. I couldn't tell you, how many people continue to tell me that they're going to be there. So it means the world to me. And, we got some great talent going to be there. Mr. Grimm's going to be there. He's another indie guy who's going to be there. Rockstar's another indie guy who's going to be there from the area. So it's almost like, I said this to my wife the other day. It's not the big time, right? It's not the top company. But man, this is like, playing single A ball your whole career and the Milwaukee Bucks call you up for a 10-day contract. You're not playing for the Yankees, but you're going to be on TV. You're going to be at a national spot. You're in the big arena. Like, go out there and show them what it is. You know what I mean? So, while it's not the mainstream top thing, it's you're there, and go out there and perform your very best.
Now, could you tell us where you could be found on social media?
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook at Shawn Carlson. You can find me on Twitter at Ranch Hand Carlson, only one H, because Twitter is weird with how many letters you can have in your name. And you can find me on Instagram at Carlson_9245. And that's pretty much all my socials. I have a TikTok. That's Carlson Money, I think. But I don't really use it that often. It's more for my daughter wanting to see things. So, but man, I appreciate all you do. You work so hard for the area, and trust me, there's a lot of guys who appreciate it. You are one that really puts everything out there, whether, you're going to clutch black cord or not. I've had a lot of people send me your articles. Let me say that, who are like, they'll send them to me and be like, did you read this? And, so I appreciate that. I appreciate a non-biased journalist. We had a conversation going into this about some things you had wrote about, and I appreciate you very much, on doing that. There's a lot of guys who want to just write whatever to get friends with whoever. And, if you can sit there and have a conversation with somebody, depending on what you write about, and hear people out, I respect that. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thanks again for having us. I look forward to seeing you at the NWA show next week in Philly.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to get a picture together, brother.
Sure. Thanks again for joining us on Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire. Please join us for our next great episode wherever you get your podcasts. Now for our credits. Host is Jeff Quinton. That's me. Production assistant is Josie Quinton. Producer is Scott English. If you'll please check out dmvwrestlingnews.com every day to get the latest pro wrestling news from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond, we'd appreciate it. Thanks again.